Get ready to stir it up.
With real conversations, let's have real conversations.
Get ready to stir it up.
Life events and everything in between, let's go.
Get ready to stir it up.
No capping, if guests got you covered right up.
Get ready to stir it up. Stir it up.
Come on.
Get ready to stir it up.
Hello, welcome to Stir It Up. Today, I have Dr. Nefertiti Popolampo. Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
We're going to be talking about the dreaded conversation, divorce. So, coming to the decision, actually letting go, and what life looks after you've let go.
Heavy topic.
Heavier.
We like it.
I have always maintained that no one gets divorced because they want to per se, right?
Okay.
Almost, we all get married and hope that it will last forever.
Mm-hmm.
But life throws us curveballs. And sometimes we don't have the resilience to
weather the curveballs.
To weather the curveballs, or to punch back at the curveballs, or, stay the course.
Is it necessarily the case that everybody who gets married expects to go the distance? Or that there might be some people who, while they're aware this might not be the best pairing they could get into,
it nonetheless.
they have a sense that, it could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
But for the current circumstances,
This is it.
might as well, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you are right.
Yeah.
But even within that, because you might see, I'm not really sure about this, but in the back of your mind, is it disposable when you start off?
Not necessarily disposable, but I don't think everybody who goes into a marriage, you see, it's like investment. You're going to make the investment, and you ask yourself, well, what will happen if it doesn't work? Well, if it doesn't work, I'll be out 500,000. And so you put in 500,000 because you don't want to be out a million. You want to be out about 500. That's about what you can.
That's what you're willing to.
What you can manage. Nobody wants to lose anything. Of course, you don't even want to lose 50,000, right? But
You don't even want to lose 5.
you don't want to lose 5. But in case the thing works, that one too might not be bad.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work, you know what you do and how you get out. And because divorce is an option, I think some marriages are more of a current, well, I'll deal with that when I get there. I can see the potential for it going badly, but I'll do that when I get there. For now, I've been single too long, and it's a good guy and it looks great, and the wedding is going to happen. So sometimes there's short-term considerations or family pressure. There's short-term considerations that make people jump into marriages where they're not necessarily at that level of, yes, I've committed, I feel this is going to go, but I'm more like, well, I hope this works. There's some risks, but at this time, I can't worry about those.
I think there's always a risk, right? Even with the best paired people.
Yeah.
I have often wondered if you go in with that risk front and center, and even when it's quite glaring, there's this subtle hope or subtle, and maybe I'll deal with it when I get there, like you're saying.
We'll do when I get there.
But it's almost like, well, let's try it.
Let's try
Let's try this and see. So I discovered an expression called learned helplessness. Do you know what learned helplessness is?
I don't know that I have the definition that you'd be thinking about.
What does it mean to you when you think about learned helplessness?
When you get in a situation where...
And I'm going to try and find it and see. So I give a proper definition.
That's what I'm saying. I'm one of those people where if I don't have the actual definition, I'll always
But what does it sound like
I'll always
to you?
give that response. You get in a situation where you don't believe you're empowered to do anything different from where you are. It's not a preferred scenario, but you don't feel you have the whatever tools or wherewithal that it takes to make a difference in the situation.
Sounds like it. So I'll read it to you. It says, learned helplessness is a psychological concept where a person, and it's boldly in bracket, or animal.
Yeah, they also learn. They
right?
go through that.
Develops a passive or resigned attitude after repeatedly experiencing situations where they feel they have no control. Even where opportunities to change their circumstances arise, they may not take action because they have learned to believe that their efforts won't make a difference.
Hope deferred.
Deferred.
It's internal resilience at its broken state.
Someone passed a comment that a lot of marriages come to a state of learned helplessness at a point in time. And that's often the beginning of the end. And normally it's one party who is in that position of learned helplessness where they feel like, I can't do anything about this. I can't change this. Whatever it is that they feel is the bane of that situation.
Well, hope is powerful, though.
I know hope is powerful.
And you lose
And
it.
you know hope is powerful.
And you lose hope. Right? So these three remain: faith, hope, and love.
Okay.
When you lose hope, you can really end up. I mean, if everybody, like you were just saying, it's almost like people go to war, people get in marriages, they always have that will, person to person will to make it work.
Yeah.
And so if you don't believe you can, even when you believe you can, look how hard it is.
And then when you don't.
When you don't believe you can, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So you've come to the point where you don't believe you can do anything. What are the things that hold you back from walking away?
If you believe that you can't change the situation, you have two options. You adapt to it and you figure out what you change about yourself so that you can stay in it. Or you decide that it's untenable and that you're getting out. I think for me, because of, it's a religious thing to a certain extent, right? You made your vows in front of God, etc. So the Bible condition of, infidelity, etc., became more important, that, save for infidelity, actually. So I think that becomes an easy excuse, right? If a marriage is difficult and there's infidelity involved, then it becomes easy to say, I'm jumping ship.
To what extent do you agree or disagree with the statement that by the time someone comes to the point that they are walking away, they've tried everything possible?
Everybody's different.
Some people don't even bother trying. Or
what they call trying, you see, everybody's tolerance level. So what I might call trying, what I put myself through in order to try,
it might be very varied for me.
So for me, I feel like I have to endure this, endure that, and go here and pray and do this, talk to the person, and then just act like it's not there for a while, see if it gets better. But the other stuff, somebody's like, what? I put up with this thing for 1 month. You are lying. They're out. Yeah, and the person was like, 1 month. Can you imagine? Somebody has been trying different things for 5 years. You did it in 3 months. You're like, forget this. I'm out. So everybody's notion of what it's really based on those frames. What do we imagine is what should happen?
So there is a scale for everybody, right? And there is almost a threshold, as I would call it.
Yeah.
But whatever that threshold is, according to the individual, they've tried their maximum best. And
Or
maybe
they're
not.
unwilling to try anymore, whichever that means.
Okay.
Because I think maximum best, really, most people know that they might have more than them that they don't want to give.
Okay. Tell me
Most.
more.
So, even with jobs and things, if somebody decides that this job is too much, I can't stay here any longer, you can see them say that at a point, and 6 months later, they're still there saying the same thing. They didn't die, they're still there. When somebody says, I can't do this anymore, they don't mean that they cannot physically do it. They can do it. What they're saying is the cost is more than I'm willing to pay. And what I'm paying is not acceptable to me for this thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
It's
that's
not worth it.
Yes, to me, it's not acceptable for whatever. It could be worth or anything else. Whatever it is.
But what's the whatever? What else could be the whatever? It's not worth it to me. That's how I see it. And so, yeah.
Maybe I mean, so importance, because worth would be like, it is or isn't important. It could be, or somebody could say, it would have been worth it, but I have this other thing going on over here that makes me, I have either I've seen somebody else or I've, things that sometimes there's situations, a lot of people, they talked about how much Facebook was involved in divorces, recently.
How
Just
so?
social media. Oh, most divorces had, like at least in the United States, I know in the mid-2010s, there was a big issue. A bunch of churches who were even telling their members to get off of Facebook because most divorces had a Facebook element. They had somebody either reconnecting with an old flame on Facebook or and then all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Then running some clandestine relationship on Facebook. So that level of access. So it used to, because humans usually we find the best quality mate we can find, then we settle with them, and then you kind of work through that, you accept it. And then social media gives you this ability to talk to all of these
options
people.
and opportunities to reconnect.
Yes, and to feel like, look at the choice I made when I could have chosen this.
Yeah.
People start having all kinds of issues. And so that type of comparison, there are lots of interesting little things like that go into people choosing to give up. And those are not always a situation of them saying that, I've done my, the person's just making a calculated, because it's socially acceptable, people are just making calculated decisions to remove themselves from those situations.
So we know the things that get people to walk away, right? It's the unmet expectations, it's the money, financial issues, it's the sex, it's the infidelity here, it's the lack of a connection or not being able to communicate.
Eventually, they're drifting apart.
Sometimes it's even the kids, right? Sometimes having children takes a toll on
a real
the
toll on some people, yes.
And sometimes, you realize that this is not what I signed up for, or people discovering new sides to themselves
that aren't compatible with the situation they're in.
And they're no longer compatible, right? What I want to talk about a bit is, what are the things that make people stay even when they feel like, or they have legitimate grounds to walk away?
Wow. I knew a lady who should have been leaving the man she was with. They weren't even married, they were engaged. But they had been together a very long time. And the man was just not that stable.
Okay.
And I remember talking to her. This was a very professional lady, and she was complaining about some stuff she had been through, what she was going through. And you ask her, like, why are you
still there?
Yeah. She's like, well, I love him. I'm like, wow. Okay.
But I can see that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those, I have feelings that make me not happy when he's not in my life. And whether he's good or bad, those feelings persist. And so some people will do that based on feelings. For some other people, those social pressures we talked about, the reason why we have big weddings is so that there are lots of people who were there when you said I do. And for some people, societal perception matters enough that they won't want to go back on those. It's unfortunate that divorces are now so societally acceptable that I don't think that has much pull. You know, it's strange if you're like, maybe let's say you're in your mid-40s and you've never been married. Someone will look at you, maybe strange.
Something wrong with you.
However, if you're mid-40s, been divorced, perfectly fine. Like,
No, but there's also something wrong with you.
No, most people, I haven't seen the type of what's wrong with the person that they're looking at you for being mid-40s, never been married. It's not the same as what they're looking at for being mid-40s.
You've been divorced.
At least you've been married. You know what I mean?
Somebody.
Listen, yeah, because that's at least you've been married. So I think that there's
That's such a bizarre way to put it.
It's a terrible.
But why is that the case, though?
Because it's a rite of passage that no one expects anyone to completely fall out of the boat from, right? So nobody expects that you, at no point, so you lived and you died the whole time, you never got married. It's a bit...
But some people make that choice.
Yeah, some people choose that. If the person chose it, that's different. But in general, they expect that the average person walking around at some point will find a mate that they think is lifelong material.
Or someone chooses them.
And yeah, will settle down with that person. And so if you go throughout your life without having done that even once, then people think there's something more strange than if you did it and for whatever reason it didn't work out. You know, because they expect for you to at least have done it. Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, I know. For me, there's a lot less pressure.
So the compromise. So just coming back onto the question. So the first compromise was I stay because I love him. Mm-hmm. What other compromises are there? And the societal pressure.
It's what society will say to me if I get out. Other ones are, financial.
Too much tied up and locked up together.
Yeah, so one, like, I don't want to lose what I've put in. And other ones, too, is like my standard of living is kind of tied to this person. So why would I reduce it? People would say, I'm not going to leave for somebody else to
come and enjoy
what I built, right? And so all of these sorts of logistical, very important logistical calculations also come into the decision. Now, very, very important logistical conversations, I must say. Yes, very important logistical conversations.
But the question I have is, at what point in time do these logistical conversations become second fiddle?
What do you mean? Second fiddle to?
To the decision to walk away. Because right now they're the primary marker, right? I stay because I don't want the shame. Mm-hmm. I stay because I feel these huge, big emotions towards this person. I stay because my social status is linked to this person. I stay because they're my financial plan.
Yeah.
No, because that's the case, right?
Yeah.
They're my retirement plan.
So at what point will somebody go past that? I think that it's that one. It comes down to your own beliefs and convictions and what you think is okay to tolerate under those circumstances. Because some people, like, for example, for someone like me, if somebody even raises their hand, I mean, we're both going to the hospital, and that relationship is over. So there are certain things I can't even imagine, would never tolerate. Like, just, it's zero tolerance. For some people, it's like after the 6th time he hit me and my kid was there, then at that point, I'm like, wow, I really need to think about possibly getting out of this relationship. You see what I'm saying? Which is all the same. It's just a matter of what have they seen and normed before, right? Yeah. And what seems okay under those circumstances. For most people, it's going to be based on their norms, what they see behind them. So some people, are perfectly comfortable, like, I know my husband, sleeps around, who cares? Like, I'm not capable of servicing him all the time anyway, so why would I?
Well, he can. Let him go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I want all that pressure anyway. Let him release somewhat, that kind of. So some people have that perspective. The other person is like, oh my gosh, he did it once, I'm out. I can't believe this. My world is shattered. So you know what I mean. So we have different levels of tolerance, really based on what you think is tolerable. And for us, we all have our different emotional profiles. So certain things for one person is like, oh, that was so annoying. And you're angry and talking to your girls for the rest of the night, and then you're done. And for another person, that same event was life-shattering.
Yeah.
And you're walking around like a zombie for the rest of the month. So different people, so the person walking around like a zombie, obviously this person is not going to be productive. So they're like, look, this thing is detrimental to my well-being across the board. If I cannot work, this is not going to work, right? Yeah. Well, the first person can be angry and, do some passive-aggressive things for the next few days. A few days later, he's even forgotten that thing they did to it, so.
I find that even when you go into the union, there are certain values and beliefs or certain strong points of view you go in with. But as you begin to invest and as you begin to commit and as you begin to kind of work together, you might begin to make compromises on some of those values that you even brought into the relationship, right? Yeah. So you'd find that when you're a 23-year-old or 25 or 27-year-old, you say something like, if a man ever hits me, I am gone, right? And then you get hit. And suddenly, there are so many reasons why you will justify it. And I'm not saying that it's right, but then there's justification or there's reasons why you begin to kind of think about it slightly different based on your new reality. And it could be based on these hygiene factors or these administrative factors that we've talked about, like finances, the way you feel emotionally, the societal pressures that you have to deal with, and so on and so forth, right? It's the same way with infidelity. Like, if a man cheats on me, this is how I'm going to do. I'm out of there. I ain't doing this.
And this is my understanding, and your understanding of somebody cheating on you, what it means to you, is part of that. So if you come up with a new definition or additional or more nuanced meaning to what that means,
and then suddenly
you may not decide. You might have have evolved in that sense and decide that it's possible.
And what I find is that it's the journeying and the maturing and the evolving part of yourself as you go into that relationship, right? And then you beginning to sometimes even lose a part of yourself.
Yeah.
And it happens to both men and women, right? Where a man has very clear views on what's important to him, but suddenly he becomes like, almost stoic and just takes it, right? Instead of even addressing some of the things that would be important to him. Because, you know what? It's a learned helplessness that we talk about. I can't change her. You know what? She's going to do what she's going to do. So let me just leave her. And then women also are often caught up in that, especially when they don't have financial security or the independence. So they're reliant on a man. And a man can be, and a lot of men can be almost financially abusive if there's such a thing.
Yes. Right? Because they use it to control
it's a control tool. Yeah. So you find a lot of men who say, I wish my wife would work. And maybe in the back of their heads, they think they do, but subliminally, at a certain point, I do think that they like the idea that the woman is not working because it helps them keep a certain status quo that suits the dynamic, I think.
Yeah, some people are like that. Those who want or need that kind of control would appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. So you've made the decision, which was quite, regardless of whether it was difficult or it was easy, after, whether there was compromise or there wasn't, right? Tell me the kind of support one needs when you make that decision.
There's something about divorces are always hard. Anyway, they're always hard. Doesn't matter how resolute you are or how long or short the marriage is. Divorces are always kind of tough. They're emotionally harrowing. They tend to take a lot out of you. And so, anything you would think of as the support, which we know fairly well generally, the support you would think of for a grieving situation, like you're grieving, you're mourning somebody who's passed.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of support. You need your people, It's good to
do the whole funeral.
Yeah. Because it really is, it's a grieving process. You're grieving the reality that was
loss.
supposed to be, the loss of the whole world that was built together with this person, etc. So I think just really comes down to your support structure, your friends and family, those who are going to be in your corner, talk you through emotions that might be, convoluted and distressing and that sort of thing. Yeah.
But we're in a society where a lot of conversations are almost taboo. So I could know that you're going through a divorce, but I could see you and pretend like I didn't know. Right? Or I could know, and I'll talk about it with everybody else but you.
If you don't know if I'm willing to talk to you about it or not, then you wouldn't have a choice, would you? If you know that if I bring it up, then you know, okay, she's going to talk about it. Okay. But if I haven't brought it up, can you just reason it? Oh my goodness, I had share. Would you do that? I wouldn't.
But the question I ask is that what is a friendship, right? Sometimes, yes, the person may not have brought it up, but and it's one of the conversations I've had in the past about friendships, right? And in terms of how we choose our friends and who are our friends and how do we navigate these relationships, right? Your friend might not have brought it up because as she's going through that divorce, but do you then also play the ostrich? Because sometimes it's not about talking about it. Maybe it could be about saying, hey, I know this is happening. If you ever want to talk, I need you to know that I'm here.
Yes.
But I'll also give you the space to navigate it the way you think is best for you, right? Because the truth is, you are talking about it. You're talking about it to everybody else, which is something that happens very often, right? Okay, but I think that there's a lot of relationships that become fractured when there is a bit of an ostrich situation where people do not actually connect. And maybe the responsibility is on the person getting divorced to kind of bring it up.
Bring people into...
Right, but sometimes they just don't have the tools or the ability, or they're just not ready, okay? I'm just trying to work out that if your friend was going through a divorce and they still are not ready to talk about it, or they're not having the conversation, what could you be doing as a support system without also being intrusive?
What you're doing for your friend who's not willing to talk about it?
Or hasn't brought it up. It might not be that they're not willing to talk about it.
But they haven't brought it up.
But they haven't necessarily brought it up. But I mean, it's happening, but they probably haven't, or they've told you, but it's not conversational, right? But
so your relationship with that person then dictates where you are.
Okay.
Because you know how it's just like, you can use the analogy of coming into your house. I come to your house and probably walk into your kitchen. I can't come into your house and go to your room. You see what I'm saying? Like, everybody has a different... There are people who come to the house and go to... You know what I mean? So it's that... How comfortable do you feel talking to that person? The other thing is that a lot of people who are going through divorces, sometimes, depending on the type of society they're in, will feel judged to a certain extent without anyone saying anything. And so they may not be willing to listen to all perspectives. Okay. They may have found the first few perspectives they had unpleasant and unwelcome. So they're not really willing to chat with other people about divorces. There are a lot of women who believe, based on how they manage their marriages, that you really should put up with about anything. Because, that's your husband. And so, or you adapt and you put yourself... What do you
believe, my dear? Do you believe in fortitude and strength and...
There are some people who believe that, so that when you talk to them, they'll annoy you because you know what you've been through and where you are while you're getting out.
Yeah.
And the person is just be like, hey, like, it's like,
I get where you're going with it. So you're saying that sometimes you don't want to talk about it because you don't want the distractions.
Certain people's perspective is not
helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
And you don't know what kind of, especially people you see sometimes. the people, let's say, for example, I have this like high profile star marriage.
Yeah.
Right. You see us both everywhere. We're like on the town.
You're
like I'm
good.
successful.
You're
he's
like a power
successful.
couple of
We're like
sorts.
a power couple, and going up. We're seen everywhere, whatever. And people, and I have good friends who celebrate us. Some of them feel like, man, why aren't I a power couple? Or feel a little. Sometimes, once in a while, they
jealousy.
feel some kind of way here and there about it. The day that it comes out that this power couple is breaking up,
It's fractured.
there's some sideways, shade thrown and certain comments and people trying to make themselves feel better about what they've been envious about over the time. That you see people with wisdom will be very selective about who they speak to. They don't care what you're saying to other people, but don't come in my space with your mess, right? And so I think that, and a lot of times you'd be surprised that people in marriages can have can have these orientation towards people that are getting out of them, especially if they've been through maybe a fair amount and they felt like they toughed it out.
Yeah.
Then they feel like anybody should be able to do that. But I mentioned earlier, everybody's tolerance is different. And what they are going through is not what we are going through.
Yes.
So they might...
We don't do that over here.
But in their mind, it's like, and they went through and they forced and they this thing, and you are the failure for not being able to do that. So some people are
for not being long suffering.
Yes, for not being long suffering, and some people are not willing to hear that, right? And the person might even be right from a scriptural standpoint or something, and the person could grow and have more patience and more forbearance for their spouse. But at that stage, human being you're talking to, where they are, they're done, they're cooked. Yeah. And they're not trying to listen to that. And so I think there sometimes a lot of reasons why people don't share not just divorces, but bad news in general with everybody.
Okay. But it's okay to share good news.
Oh, but good news is it's neutral. No, but even there's good news some people don't share with everybody because they don't want people to become envious of them.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Even good news, you can be selective.
I think that personally, I rarely ever, I am personally selective about the good news that I share, you know. I think there's so many things that are great that happen to me that I'm kind of, let me hide this. I'm not telling you. People cannot mess up what they don't know.
Yes. Yep.
Yep. So a part of me feels that way.
Yeah. So that's the sad side of the whole support thing. You want to be there for people. You want to be friends. How do you know your perspective is even welcome? And some people don't want that many friends at that point for various reasons.
There are a lot of side effects. Mm-hmm. I call them, like how you take medication and there's side effects, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the impact, it's the fallout, the
family, the friends, having to choose sides.
Yes, there's so much, right?
The stories, the vilification in order to feel more validated about the whole experience.
There are a few areas that there is a lot that happens. Mm-hmm. I want to talk a bit about those different areas. Mm-hmm. So one of them is the children. Yeah. I'm of the view that kids who are as a result of a home that's fractured, it's hard. And you probably never recover. You might seemingly live a normal life, but there's always the stigma a lot of the time, especially in our part of the world. Now it's kind of gotten better because every other 4 people there's someone who's experienced that within the family circle, so the stigma is not as high, but it's still there, right? Okay. But there's also sometimes children feeling like it's their fault. There's also co-parenting. It's not the easiest thing, right? Because
families are hard.
The values might be different. Because you might not be getting along. Sometimes that also comes with these challenges. What are your thoughts on just navigating that when it comes to kids?
I think, so interestingly, my own personal experience, I never had, my parents were divorced when I was like 6. I never had the sense that it was my fault. I was very clear on what happened. I was very clear on the issues they had. Nobody kept that from us, so we knew it didn't have anything to do with us. Our family, as far as our relationship with both my parents, didn't change much. It was just like whoever traveled, my dad used to pick us up whenever he wanted. He used to come help us with our homework. I mean, pretty much, life didn't look that much different. What's interesting is when I was in, I think I was from 5 O levels, and there was an exam, and as an oral English, they would ask you just regular questions you should be able to answer. Where does your mother live? Where does your father live? And when I mentioned different places for them, the lady says, "Oh, so you come from a broken home?" And I was like, "Me? No." And then I was like, "Wait a second. Oh, that's what they call that?" I had no idea. I've been living like that. If I'm from 5, I'm talking from when I was 6 years old. So I'd been living like that for years. I didn't see myself coming from a broken home. I had no perception whatsoever of that.
What that was?
No, I didn't think. I mean, that when she used that term, I was like, that's what. At first, I was like, "Oh no," and I was like, "Hey,
Maybe that's what they
then
call
I was
it.
like, that's what they are calling this. I don't feel like I'm a broken home, but like, okay, that's, because I think the relationship with the kid is what's more important. It's where there were things that were not said that leave the gap for the child to think it was me.
And fill it up.
Yes, so because the enemy will now use the hole you've left. No, I'll fill if you won't tell them the truth. I'll fill it for you. The other really crazy part about that whole thing, and I think this is one of the biggest and most important things when it comes to the children, is that the children really do need both of their parents. And
I
so
agree.
the parents who use kids as some sort of
As
control
pawns and control tools.
is absolutely heinous. I know. I mean, we had when my parents got divorced when I was really young. That was one thing. My dad would come and pick up any time.
Yeah.
You can pick us up anytime. He used to come and help us with the homework. And my mom might even not be for certain periods. She might even be speaking to him. She doesn't care. Come and pass. Let him come and talk to his kids. And we didn't see any. So we didn't really see much of a difference.
Yeah.
In that area. And I think that's one of the more important things for women who keep their kids from their parents or from their fathers and things like this is really damaging to the children.
Yeah.
And having that fatherly presence, especially even for young girls, for young boys,
Yeah.
it makes a really big difference. And so I don't know why you would hurt yourself, in the long run, you, the mother, would hurt yourself like that, trying to punish. But I think you need to kind of have you and him their fight. And then separate the children part to where you can make sure that they have access to the love, care, and attention from their father, so that they can grow and be healthy.
Okay. You are absolutely right. I've always maintained that children need both parents. Sometimes there are all these theories about boys need their dads and girls need their moms and yada yada yada. And all of that is normally from how they are being raised, and it's just the physical part of it, right? But I think about all the girls with daddy issues.
Yeah.
And it's just the absence of a present man and not being able to know how to relate with a man and, the role a man plays in their lives. And that's because you've either had a father who's always busy working or not there or hasn't taught you, helped you work out your own self-worth, right? When you see girls whose dads were present or whose dads were in their lives, you can see it.
Yeah.
Right? You can see it.
You see daddy's girls like myself. You can tell.
It's not even a conversation. Right? It's like you can see that they feel confident, they understand what they are worth and where their value is placed. They do not need a validation from somewhere else. And so for me as a mom, it's absolutely important, right? It's just that sometimes life throws you all these curveballs and you might, sometimes you don't get things exactly the way that you want to have them, right? But the reality is that, and it's the same with sons, right? They need a mother figure in their life, but they also need dads because boys at a certain age are going to be mimicking the behaviors from their dads and learning a lot more from their dads. It's just that sometimes we don't go past our hurts. And then the children become weapons of warfare.
So bad.
No, but it's
so bad. It's
a reality, isn't
sad.
it? Right? And it's the little things, but not being able to agree how they're raised,
Yeah, that's another,
what the values are in terms of, okay, being able to have a united voice when it comes to how
Yes.
they are raised.
How they're raised, like their levels of discipline, and how what sort of lifestyles are they? Should they be norming?
Exactly.
And you might believe one thing, and now you're separated from a spouse who believes
And so
the other.
suddenly who believes another thing or is creating a different reality in their new home or with their new partner,
But one of the things that I always say about that is that usually it's not the quantity of exposure that the children have to their parents, it's the quality of it. So
I
that,
agree.
having one solid, so you have like a complete mess of a house where they're living, and having one solid other spouse who they come and see, but that spouse is just solid. Their
Consistent.
principles are on, they're stable, they're consistent, they give clear messaging, they're giving love but firm boundaries, all of those things. Then you still, so those are, sometimes one parent, the more disciplinarian parent or the one who has more of a focus on that, sometimes we get distressed or concerned if they're going through a divorce, that, okay, what's going to happen to my children, whatever. But really, if you are there and you're present, you have to worry about it so much. And the interesting thing is, because of you, a lot of times you as the parent with maybe better principles and better integrity, etc., because of your yardstick, whatever is deficient on the other side, they're able to sort of see it. Like the kids.
Oh, absolutely.
They open their own. You're not fooling anybody.
No. You're not
Those
fooling
kids,
children.
They see you.
No. You're not fooling children.
They see everything.
Let me tell you. I have an episode with these, my daughters over here. Ay. New levels of respect I had for them. New levels. Sometimes we don't respect our children. We think they are children, and so, who are they? They don't know anything. We should be telling them what to do.
You'd be so surprised.
I was thoroughly amazed.
You'd be so
I
surprised.
sat there listening to them, was in complete awe of them. I realized it was humbling for me on so many levels, because I realized that they're more aware than I think. A lot of thought goes into a lot of the things that they do. I actually told them that from now on, anytime I want to have a serious conversation with them, I'll put on cameras. So we'll have the conversation. That's when they will be sensible. Because my children, when I'm busy talking and I'm busy ranting, they're having fun. You know what my girls are like. They're like, you're calling them, they're mumbling around, moping around, busy hugging me.
I know.
But suddenly,
when the cameras are on, all of a sudden.
it was a proper conversation. They were serious, they were paying attention, they were giving me responses. And you suddenly realize that all the talking you've been doing, they hear it. It's just that you are familiar, so we don't take you seriously.
But even when I was a kid, what I knew and what my parents thought I knew, what I could see, what they thought I could see was different. But this is a different age. We're now in this age where these kids' eyes are wide open. They can see and know more.
You're in the car and your parents are having a conversation and they switch into God and they add some tree and they use some big English and they're trying to confuse you
off there.
and throw you off, and you're like,
please, I can hear everything.
Like, what are you trying to throw me off? What sense is this? You crying, I've not even got the story right. I can fill in the blanks for you. Anyway.
It's sad.
That legal battle, that financial bit.
Wow.
The divvying up of things.
Where it gets ugly. Usually.
But does it?
Not always.
Okay.
Not always, but usually, yes. Usually there's some entrenched positions, because somebody feels, I should be able to have this, especially if they've been together a long time.
Okay.
It can get, that's usually where there's some, people dig their feet in and end up having to go to court or something.
But maybe the divvying up is also about mourning the loss. Sometimes I feel like people fight. It's not always about the things. It's about the attachment to the other person. I've seen that happen.
Or just not wanting to lose more than you've already lost. Like, I've lost this much. Now you want me to lose my
Even
favorite
more.
couch on top of it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, my family is in shambles, blah, blah, blah. Now even this small thing too. No, some people just, you don't want to have to lose more than they've already lost. In the state of Florida, there's a type of divorce that says that one spouse says, I don't care what the proceeding is. They can just let me know when the final judgment is, and I'll take it. Where's the level of trust that one spouse would have to have to sign that paper. It says, just fast track it when it's done, tell me. And there's literally a format for a divorce that goes that way. So, I mean, sometimes it just says, because a lot of times you hear these contentious, saying they're fighting with them. But I mean, there's also the quiet one where everybody's like, hey, they're having drinks the next day.
mean,
we don't want to be married, but hey, we're cool.
No,
that one too.
we're good.
But good. We just, as spouses, it's not working. But hey, we can have drinks. So so doing. Oh, yeah, they're doing pretty good. Yeah. So, different colors of it.
I think that the healthy bit is being able to maintain a certain semblance of normality and respect, right?
Throughout the proceeding.
Throughout the proceedings, which is not always easy.
It's tough because you're talking with most people, the fact that they're getting divorced tells you that the thing has gotten unpleasant, significantly so. So a lot of times you have a whole bunch of negative energy, negative like tension against, there's some against energy and things already. That's why you're in the divorce. Sort of highly optimistic to expect to have gotten to the point like that and somehow
no, I hear you.
Cruise into.
I hear you, but I think that and maybe everybody has a different experience, right? But by the time you are getting to the point where you are both going your separate ways. I mean, there's always one person who doesn't want to go.
Usually there's one was going and that one is being dragged into separate ways.
Or there's one who is going and the other one is playing coy and not saying anything right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or there's one who is resisting going, or whichever way, right? But I think that by the time you get to the place where you're saying, we're actually going our separate ways, it's healthy to make a decision that you're going to do it in a way that you don't overinvest emotionally anymore. But it's not
overinvested.
Oh, you are overinvested, but
so how can you come out? You can't just take yourself out of the overinvestment. You're already overinvested. You're angry about the things you're losing.
Let me tell you something. It is ripping you up, right? Why do you want to continue to fight over it? Because the fighting over things increases your stress levels. It rips you up even more.
So let's make sure we answer that question so that those who are asking, who feel like it's not a rhetorical question, can have an answer. It's because I've given up enough and I don't want to give up that. So most people fight over stuff, right? Yeah. Stuff and standing. No, I want this custody. I want it to work for my time, not your time. I want for you to be inconvenienced and for me to be fine because I don't deserve to have any more negative happen to me. This has been bad enough. That sort of thing, right? Yeah. And so now you're fighting for those things that are not, they're mutually exclusive. If I win, then you lose. If you win, I lose. Those points that are like that. And so that's where the people start fighting. Yeah. Because I have a good friend of mine who's going through divorce. Things like who's keeping their kids' passports. Keep them one. No, I want to hold up. I mean, stuff like that,
Is that a thing to fight about?
Yeah. Or there's I have, friends who maybe the family gave gifts to one, but they've been using all of them. So now, since it's gifts, the one person's taking the gifts and the other family was like, no, we've all been using it. And all of a sudden you're taking it for, well, it was my family, it's my gift. I don't, these types of things where you've grown attached to something and they're telling you, well, now the house is splitting, so you can't have that. Because it came in through my side, and so it goes with me. Yeah. And the person feels like, hey, wait a second, I was so much a part of that as well. So there are lots of things, I think a lot of times, especially you're splitting your lives in two, lots of things to fight about, lots of things people get upset about. I think custody tends to be one of the big, the custody arrangement as one of the big ones. And so it's really a blessing when, parents can just think of it in terms of, okay, raising your kids is separate from us fighting. And that we're just going to be, reasonable and try to get as much time with these children as possible. Yeah. But the legal system, I'm not particularly familiar with the legal system through divorces in Ghana. Is that a quick process? How does that?
Oh, my divorce was begun and finished in a month.
Here in Accra?
Yeah.
Like, a month? Jeez, I can be out of this.
Yeah, I think... No, I think it's about how you go into it, right?
Was there a separation ahead of this month?
There was a separation ahead of it.
But once you started that process.
No, but once once the filing went in, the advice that I got that was helpful was to do a settlement agreement upfront. So you have the conversations on how you're divvying up things, right? So, and pretty much it wasn't a lot to say we're splitting this or splitting that, right? And it was really about, okay, custody of the kids. And there was a lot of guidance on that, right? So
From where?
So there's established guidance where normally here, the mother has custody and then the father has access, right?
Okay.
So it was a matter of what does that access look like? And when the conversation was had, it was drafted.
Simple. Everybody was okay with it.
Everybody, I mean, it wasn't really that much of a conversation, right? So by the time you were going in, it was, this is the care arrangement. This is how we are paying school fees. This is how we are paying for the kids' care. This is how we are sorting out, access to the kids. For the things that we have, this is what you're keeping, this is what I'm keeping. And all of that is
all
drafted.
templated and it was drafted.
It's templated, it's drafted, it's signed. We go in. The standard questions are asked. Have you done everything possible to
and everybody will answer yes because they're done.
I think that was a very difficult question for me personally, right?
Yeah.
Because it was a point where you kind of stop and you think, oh, wow, this is happening, right?
Wow. When they ask you that question.
When they ask you that question, because it brings a bit of finality to it, right? But, and that was it. And they literally say, we'll give you a month, go and come back.
And you come back and the papers are done.
And that was it, yeah. But I think it was just the thinking that I'm not going to fight over anything.
So you had that mindset that you weren't going to fight?
Of course I had that mindset, yes. I had been to a point where it was, you know what, we are good. This is it.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think that what you find is that you don't want to put yourself through anymore, right? And once you need to come to that decision, right? So it wasn't amicable, it wasn't messy. And I did it by myself. I think that the only part that was interesting was I did it by myself. I went to court by myself. I didn't tell any of my friends. They were mad at me at the end of it. And that's what I was asking about support systems, right? What support systems do you do? I asked you earlier, what kind of support do you give a friend who's going through that, right? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the sort of thing that people shouldn't exactly be mad about you doing by yourself, though. It's kind of a very
but I
thing,
think
maybe afterwards coming to talk to them about it. But if you choose to go through an experience like that with your spouse and you're dissolving your marriage, I mean, I think if you choose to
But I think the reason why there was that sentiment was he had support, right? So it was almost like, why would you do this by yourself? But
did you feel like you didn't? Did you feel like you didn't have support, or you were just carrying out what you had set out to do?
I guess it's just the way I do things, right?
For me, I don't really see it as just get it done.
Yeah,
what is the difference? It's like applying for something. I'm going to apply for something. So these are the steps I'm doing them. You say I don't have support.
That's a bit of that's like you don't have any emotions.
No, you have emotions around any of those things, right? Maybe you're really excited about your kid getting into Harvard. You're still going through the process with the emotion to get them in. Right?
I love the Harvard analogy. Maybe I'll have a kid who goes to Harvard.
You get really excited. So you're with all this emotion, but the emotion is always gets in the way of the fact that the same you may not call anybody. You're just going to sit down with the entire process that it takes to finally get them in and do it. So, I mean, I feel like going through it without people now, trying to manage the aftermath and whatever, that, because I think it really sometimes starts from there. From getting divorced is when now we talk about the support, because now you have to walk out your life in the new reality and really deal with the mourning, etc. That process itself, to some extent, can be sort of administrative and so you have so much to deal with, even just in the nitty gritty admin. And so it's like that part. If you don't add anybody, I don't see anything wrong. When you have to cope with the thoughts and dealing with at that point.
But I think it was more about the thoughts and the emotions, right? Because it's people that you have built long-lasting relationships with, right? But I think for me, the way I've always seen some of these things is sometimes this is my thing to deal with. And so I want to own it. And I also sometimes want to be private about some of these things.
Yes, that's the thing.
Right? And so you kind of deal with it. And then we report back the parts of it that we want to report.
That we want to report, exactly. Because for me, that feels very private to me. Totally private. I don't just walk through it. When you're done, you're done.
Yeah.
And if somebody actually asks you, then for me, I don't think it's the sort of thing. But then again, I guess it depends. I mean, interestingly, I think I'm the same way about grieving. So maybe I'm the one who's.
But I think the grief around it is enormous.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're grieving multiple things. You're grieving what could have been. But you're also grieving what you've lost. And you're grieving for your children.
Yeah.
You're grieving the investments you've made. And the investments are emotional, they're mental. There's quite a bit of grieving that goes into that, right? But I guess what I do see is that it's important to always be at a place where you've given it your absolute best.
That's going to make you feel the best about it.
It makes it always easy.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't make it easy.
But it makes it easier. At least that's the best feeling you can have about that.
That you know that
you did everything.
I couldn't have done anything better, right? I did everything possible. It just didn't work the way I wanted it to work, and that makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
So you've finally gone in. You've done the 1 month speed date, or you've done the 5 year,
the 5 year separation
and
some people
screaming
extended separation and then go through sometimes like 6 year process, 4 years separated, 2 years go to divorce,
whichever one that you've done. I remember my friend described it as, she says, you know that your ex-husband is always going to be a pebble in your shoe. And when she said that, I smiled at the time, right? And because she had been divorced for not a long time, maybe 2 years, right? And I said, what do you mean by that? She says, I just want you to understand that you might think that you've gotten rid of him. Yeah. You haven't gotten rid of him.
Especially if you're co-parenting.
But that was the point she was making.
Yeah.
Because you have 2 daughters with him.
Yes. So
and I thought I understood her. I genuinely think I'm a decently intelligent woman. And so I thought, I get it. I have it worked out in my head. But I guess you then realize that when you have children, you never actually thoroughly get divorced.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're always part of that nuclear family, regardless.
There's always some intertwine. And so as much as you create distance, and which is something that's really important to me, creating distance, right? Because, you want to create a healthy distance so that he has his life and does what he needs to do. So, for example, just even in terms of times you'll call, right? If there was something, with the kids or anything, or getting the kids to actually do the communication, or even access into their space, you know, just kind of keeping very clear boundaries, just so that also as they move on, they're also able to have their own relationships without you being in the middle, it being the messy middle, right?
Yes.
But what I find is there's so much that we don't anticipate. after the walking away? Because you think it's going to be a clean cut and your life is going to be perfect.
And then you end up with all the same issues you had
I wouldn't say same issues.
coming up through the
There are issues that
parenting, the
come up throughout
co-parenting.
the co-parenting. Yeah. So a friend of mine, for example, has been dealing with contrary where mother contradicts everything
Oh dear.
he's doing,
Oh
right?
dear.
So that creates, and I'm like, but she's just looking for a reaction out of you, right?
Oh, so immature though.
No, but is it immature?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you're choosing not to give your kids stability over your own being vindictive.
I hear you. I hear you. I would describe it. I hear you on the immaturity. I would describe it as, yes, immature to a certain extent, but sometimes people are just hurt. And
How you
they
deal
don't
with your
know
hurts is-
how to deal. Is the immaturity.
That
So-
second part is the
that-
immaturity.
yes,
So the
it's-
being hesitant is
Yeah.
Then the not knowing how to deal with it
with
is the
it's
immaturity.
the
Yeah.
immaturity, yeah.
That's where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
It's really sad because yes, it is. A lot of that comes from pain. But you have to remember, all of these things. Remember, we said that when we were starting all this, we're talking about attraction, etc., and saying that living cells have a prime objective, prime directive to procreate.
Yeah.
It's the same with certain kinds of pain, etc. So if you don't heal that pain, then you're going to cause it to someone else. And that's what I meant by there's certain principalities that will give you a fruit. There's a seed, the seed from which will give you a fruit. That fruit has seed in it. So if it gets fully mature, that fruit now will drop seeds to bear. So those seeds are for your kids now.
Yeah.
Because you've been treating your spouse badly, and so your kids now have a seed of a certain instability in there.
Yes.
And the spouse also is being hurt by the things because you're not able to heal. And that's why, it's really important, under these types of circumstances, to try to get help to heal and to think in terms of healing, not in terms of retribution, but in terms of healing for myself, right? Rather than punishing the other person.
From a religious standpoint, we don't, I always say that I'm not a big believer in divorce. And we know the grounds on which you can divorce.
Yeah, but still God hates divorce. So let's...
No.
Let's-
That's what I'm saying. From a religious standpoint,
Yes.
I don't believe in divorce, right? And but we know what the grounds are, right? And I don't disagree with you on that, right? What I want to understand is what are the things that we can do within our relationships, right? Once you get to that point, to begin to heal and to move or be able to look into the future with a bit more optimism and a bit more positivity.
This idea of optimism and positivity, interestingly, a lot of it's a choice. So remember earlier we were talking about that Philippians 4:8, I think, with the whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, whatsoever things are true, noble, if anything be virtue, those are the things you should be thinking about. Things like choosing that orientation. I'm going to think about the good sides of everything. I'm going to think about what I have to be grateful for. I'm not going to think about the things where I lost in terms of somebody took advantage of me, but rather think about them in terms of, well, they were able to be blessed under those circumstances, even if I didn't have in that case. And if you're willing to give in that way, as opposed to like holding on to hurt and pain, in just I am outraged that something like that could ever happen to me, it should never happen to me, and that sort of thing. So if you're going to focus on how hurt you are, then it becomes near impossible for you to heal. So you have to be willing and able to give that, to say, you know what, I've done worse to God, and He still loves me. And so I can figure out how to give the grace that I ask for every day. And so I'm going to try to do that. And even if I can't give grace, I'm going to focus on what's great around me.
Yeah.
there's no way you're focusing on what's uplifting
Yeah.
and being just consumed with it. Doesn't happen. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're trying to focus on what's awesome about your kids, what's awesome about your ex, what's awesome even about the divorce, what's awesome about your situation.
Like the good things that have come out of that
Yes.
situation.
And even in the bad, there was some parts that were actually very good compared to somebody's.
Yeah.
Yes, choose to be grateful.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you say, because a lot of the time that refocusing allows you time to simmer down
Yes.
and breathe, right? It takes you off the treadmill.
Yeah.
The treadmill of anger, the
Anger and
treadmill of spite
offense, yeah.
and offense and, irritation,
Revenge.
all of those things, right? And it puts you in a place of calm. And it puts you in a place ready to receive and see good things.
Yes.
And suddenly, you're your age and you look the way you look.
Yeah.
Because you're beautiful.
Because you refuse to be offended.
Sorry?
People who refuse to be offended age well. It's one of those secrets of aging. Keep saying it.
Absolutely. You age really gently.
When you refuse to be offended, yes. And there was a guy. I just watched this one of these YouTube shorts. This guy, they said he was over 100 years old. It's like 104, something like this. He drinks, he smokes, he chases women. They asked him, "What's the secret to your longevity?" "Oh, no, be anyhow. He has no problem with anybody. He's living his life, everybody free." And a lot of people who've gotten really old, when they ask them that, it's like, "Oh, I forgive everybody at the end of every day. I hold no grudges." And that's how. Yeah.
It's almost like a purging of all the negative energy within you, right? Yeah.
So does that mean that we'll age quickly when we are angry people? That actually is the case.
Absolutely. Because,
much so.
bitterness is one of those things that holds you hostage.
It's horrible. I've seen it up close.
I think as you go through things, I did a podcast with Tucci, and I was telling her about how one of the biggest lessons I've learned is contentment in life. Right. And one of my friends keeps saying, "Yeah, you be there and be content in your cubicle." And she calls my house a cubicle. It's a running joke, right? But she says, "You be there and be content in your cubicle," right? But the bottom line is, I find that I've been through so much, and if I was to hold anger and hold bitterness, the impact on me is devastating, mentally, emotionally, physically, right? It's the source of disease. You get me? It's the source of high blood pressure, so many things.
And do
right?
you know that when you have that kind of bitterness and you nurture it to a large extent, it calls to itself. So when you walk among humans, either they do things to you to hurt you further, or you see those things, you see signs of them where they're not there, and you create them. And it just continue this cycle. I've seen people who have carried hurts from these sorts of divorces, all sorts of whatever, and just end up continuing to see and pull all of this negative energy. It's just venom, and somebody will say something else and you hear all this offense, hey, he's trying to say this. And that's the thing, is that whether we like it or not, none of us are completely biased. Certain topics are raised, and because of your personal experience, you'll be like, hey, wait a second, what are you saying this? That's what we expect, that level, right?
But we're human, isn't it? That's our humanity.
But then that's why as humans, we have the choice to focus on bright things. And that alone, just that, focusing on gratitude, focusing on being happy for the other person if it wasn't for you, focusing, all of those things change the game, and it's you who wins, not them.
So I'll close this, and thank you for this conversation.
You're welcome.
I'll close this with something that's happened recently. My favorite color to wear has always been red.
Okay.
Right? But I've always found black slimming.
Okay.
So I've always liked black. right? So I have a wardrobe that is half black things. And then maybe 3 years ago, I wore something, I can't remember whether it was orange or something. And somebody says, wow, that looks really good. Right? And so I decided to start wearing colored things, like colorful
more colours.
things. Like I would wear color. But my standard go-to are jeans or black trousers or sometimes. So then I started to throw in a few other colored, like a burgundy pair of trousers or a green pair of trousers, but very ever so guardedly. And as you know, I work more out of Nairobi these days. So we are going for a meeting. And here I show up in one of my very extremely colorful, I have these boo-boo-like tops, right? So like a kimono top, right?
Yeah.
I show up in a colorful kimono top. And everybody is wearing white and black, blue and black, white and black, white and black, white and black. So I get there and I'm like, Lord, this is how you people dress over here. And they all see me and they all like go like, they were literally, it was like 12 of us going for this meeting because it was a big meeting, it was a big client meeting, right? And they all go like, right. So we walk into the client's office and everybody on the client side is also dressed funny. Like, well, not funny, but black and white, right? Or blue and white, blue and black. So finally, one of the clients walked in and she was wearing like a nice, colorful thing. So I said, thank you. Suddenly, I'm not sticking out like a sore thumb. But I'm telling you this story because I'm finding that it's also the way we express ourselves and the way we go out there and the way we show ourselves up, right? And we had a long conversation about it over the week. And everybody kept on saying, you know, it's actually nice for people to wear color. And then suddenly, I had a few people in the office who would come in and they'll be wearing color. And they said, oh yeah, we're wearing color because you wear color. I had like 3.
Oh,
and that felt nice,
started
right?
a trend.
Right. But it's just thinking about the fact that there's so many bright things that can bring color and brightness into our lives. And we don't always focus on those things.
It's disobedience, let's just be clear. Because we're supposed to.
We're supposed
It wasn't a recommendation
What?
or suggestion. You're supposed to. So
I appreciate you. And thank you. Cocktails. Yes. So, to the, what I call the fun part of all of this. Cheers. Cheers. It actually looks pretty.
it does look really pretty. Remember, I noted that it was a multicolored drink. It's like a really sweet Coke. So it's like a sweet Coke.
Give me one flavor. You're struggling.
Was that like a
Does the color do anything for you?
like a cherry something or
It's not cherry, but you're in the right direction.
Strawberry.
Strawberry. There you go.
I could tell it was one of those
Cheers.
big fruits.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank
appreciate
you.
you.